Welcome to The Cow Behind the Barn, a podcast exploring humanity, the world, and the divine as experienced and interpreted by an artist. I'm Kevin Caldwell, a co-founder of the Table Collective. Does anything in the cosmos have consciousness? And if so, what things? Everything? And what type of consciousness? And how? That question surfaced during the last few episodes as I've been exploring the nature of consciousness and feeling my way along towards an approach to that mysterious theme. I eventually landed on that question as a way to focus what I'm looking for when I turn to religious heritages and physics, philosophy, and art for answers. In the last episode, I began with animism and the Bhagavad Gita, starting with religious heritages. For those who may be just beginning to follow along, let me give just a short summary. In animism, everything, or at least almost everything, is conscious in some way. There are forms of animism which would suggest that there are multiple spirits or energies or forces that are conscious, and there's forms which say it's the same spirit animating everything. Animism sees all of life as a reciprocal relationship with the spirits or spirit of all things. In the Gita, there's a big S self, a big C consciousness, which is the self and consciousness of our very small S self. This self pervades everything, and the visible natural world is a manifestation of its energy. What we experience as our individual consciousness is actually part of the natural world, not our true self. In this episode, I'm going to continue with two more of the world's religious heritages, the teaching of the Buddha and that of Lao Tzu. But first, let me say a little bit about a sort of self-imposed limitation or focus that I've given myself. First, I'm only looking at what I referred to as 1, 2, and 3 dimensional levels of consciousness. I'm primarily looking at non-human aspects of our world. I explained my way of seeing all this in terms of 4 dimensions in prior sessions, but for now, each level is marked by the interplay of what a subject or thing or being experiences, and by the ways that they may be aware of that experience or may be aware of being aware. So what do Buddha and Lao Tzu say about the nature of consciousness understood through that framework? The Buddha. One of the core elements in the Buddha's teaching is what he called non-self or unself or not self. This is a complex idea and it's easily misunderstood. Let's start from the context of the Buddha's teaching summarized in the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The 4 Noble Truths: that human beings suffer, that suffering is due to craving and attachment, that liberation from the suffering caused by craving and attachment is possible, and that there is a path to that liberation. The path to liberation is actually where he unfolds then the Eightfold Path. To fully explore this is going to require multiple episodes, all on its own, and I can't do that here. But for our purposes, it can be summarized like this. In 8 different ways, the Buddha explores and describes the path as a process of learning to see things as they are. That's really the core of it all. And the self is one of the things the Buddha said we need to see as it is. The self is not what we think in his teaching. In fact, it is non-self. If the Buddha were asked, I think, to comment on my several dimensions of consciousness and awareness and being aware of being aware, he might say something like this. Well, Kevin, there's no permanent something that experiences events and stimuli. There's no permanent thing in you or in any subject that is aware or is aware of being aware. There is no self doing that. So how might the Buddha then respond to my Episode 2 question, going way back, where and when did I begin? For example, is there an I in that question? And if so, what is it? And if not, then who is the I that is asking it? Well, here is my summary of how the Buddha might reply to all this. The self is not a thing in me that is having experiences or being aware of them. What I am, what I call me, is the constant flow of experiences and mental states, the flow of what Buddha refers to as dependent originations. Because each new experience or perception or idea or feeling or sensation or awareness is dependent on whatever sparked it, and also on whatever experience or mental state preceded it. The mental state of this moment originates from prior experiences and from the things being experienced, hence the term dependent origination. Buddha would say about my ideas of consciousness and awareness, I think, that consciousness is part of that flow. It's an example of one of the things that is dependent on something else for its origins. Buddha describes 5 main links on that chain of dependent origination, in that flow, 5 bundles, we could say, of experiences and responses. There's form or matter, the body, for example, made up of the elements of earth and air and fire and water. And so our bodies have sensations and feelings and experiences. There are feelings, emotions. There's perceptions, mental states, perceptions of sense objects that we might see or hear, things that are, in other words, our eyes see, our ears hear, our tongues taste, etc. And then there's mental formations, things we think, concepts we form in our minds, either about the things we're experiencing or just things we think about, the ideas that we come up with. And then there's a 5th of these bundles, and that's actually consciousness, defined as the awareness of having sensations, perceptions, and mental formations, those last 3 bundles. So, in short, I am the series of experiences and feelings and mental formulations and awareness of having those. That's what I am. There is no I having those experiences and states of mind. The I is those experiences and states of mind. They are me. The chain of dependent origination, which is me, is also interconnected with other things and selves, because my experiences and perceptions originate in response to other things. So there's a web of interconnection and originations that is the source of our experiences and events, and thus the flow that is who we are is an interconnected flow. So when the Buddha speaks of non-self, he's not saying that self does not exist per se, but that it exists in a certain way, again, as the flow of our experiences and our awarenesses, we could say. Now, I want to bring in a poem here that I've shared in another episode, and then ask us to reflect on it a bit. It's my poem, Flying Feathered Thing. A flying feathered thing. What you see is a flying thing, all veins and plumes and hollow shafts, hooked quills, blood feathers, pens, in flight from nest to limb to wind to branch and back again. You see the feathered thing, tracing air, open-winged, on waves invisible as light. You see, but I know. There is no bird, no follicles, no skin, only feathers covering layers of feathers attached to and held together in a hollow fullness. These feathers that I am, this I that is a we, this single plural of feather, first, second, third person, I is not here. Yet this reeling feeling of feather lifting, feather in the wind, a shape of move and hover, that is me. I am the feathered flying thing you see. A good deal of the practices that come from Buddhist tradition of meditation ask us to focus on awareness and attentiveness. Mindfulness is probably one of the things that Buddhism is most known for. One approach is to take time to notice what your body's feeling, and then what your emotions are, what the thoughts are that are arising spontaneously in your mind, to simply be aware of them. Such self-awareness will actually begin to spill over into daily life if we do this habitually, and we'll find ourselves acting differently towards people and circumstances as a result. So I'd suggest maybe trying it for 5 minutes, even just 5 minutes a day for, say, the next few days, maybe 5 days, 5 minutes a day for 5 days, and see what happens. All right, back to the Buddha. Earlier, I said I would not be talking about human beings. However, so far I've focused a lot on humans because it enabled me to describe consciousness on Buddhist terms. So, what about other things and consciousness? In Buddhist teaching, inanimate objects don't experience consciousness in the same way that sentient beings do, at least not in sort of mainstream Buddhism. Although the Buddha and I would both use the term experience in different ways, I think he might say that inanimate objects and things experience events and stimuli without being aware of that experience. In keeping with an earlier example, the rock experiences being crushed, but is not aware of that. However, there are some schools of Buddhist thought which suggest that even inanimate objects have a potential for enlightenment, that there may be some kind of interconnectedness with consciousness at some fundamental level, even if such objects and things don't have awareness of that. In addition, I'd assume that inanimate objects then, if they do have that potential, would, like with human beings, have no inherent consciousness. Whatever consciousness may apply to them would also be that flow of experiences, feelings, and thoughts, if that applies to them. All right, now I turn to Lao Tzu. I introduced Lao Tzu in prior episodes, so I'm going to just summarize here. He was a central figure in Chinese culture and philosophy and wisdom in the 6th century before the Common Era, generally considered the founder of Taoism. His 81-stanza poem, the Tao Te Ching, is a poetic and also a philosophical masterpiece, in my view, and I think that's been borne out in the views of many throughout history. The title, Tao Te Ching, serves as a summary of what the work is, actually. So Ching refers to a book or work, in this case, the poem. The term Tao is the way everything works, and at the same time, the Tao is the working of everything. It's the flow of how everything happens and the flow of everything that happens, at least when things, especially people, act in keeping with the Tao. To act in keeping with the Tao is the main theme, in fact, of the Tao Te Ching. Well, what about the day? Day is given by the Tao to each specific thing or person. Day can be translated in several ways, but in this connection, day is the unique true nature of a person or object or animal or plant. The day of each being is what makes it what it is and is the source of that thing's unique way of being what it is. Day is what makes a thing or person different from each other thing or person. This interplay of Tao and day is expressed frequently in the Tao Te Ching. For example, in the 21st stanza, Lao Tzu says, "The capacity of day is only to follow Tao." Day is unique, but it follows and comes from Tao. Much, he'll say in other places, as a child comes from and follows and imitates its mother. So in stanza 51, he says, "Your day is born with you, but you can't possess it. It does things for you, yet it's not dependent on you. It grows, but you don't know that it is your master." This is primal Te, he says. Day and Tao are not interchangeable and not identical, but neither are they separable. They are interconnected. They are inseparable. Maybe let me try to give an illustration here. All birds fly. Every fish swims. And they do more than that, of course. This is just an illustration. They fly and they swim because of the Tao. It's their natural way. It's just what they do as a class of birds and fish. At the same time, birds and fish individually have their own unique day, which is what makes this fish swim differently from that fish. All fish swim, but each fish has a way it swims. The same is true of everything and of human beings as well. This relationship of Tao and Te also sheds light on how each specific thing or person is connected to all others, the rest of the world, the entire cosmos. Each thing or person has its own Te, and since that Te flows from the Tao, and since the Tao is the way of all things, then no individual thing is independent. Everything is interconnected through its Te to the Tao, and through the Tao to the Te of everything else. Each thing, each person, is interconnected no matter how individual and unique it or we may be. What are the implications of this for the self and consciousness? I'm going to focus on human selves because Lao Tzu is not clear about whether other things have selves. One of the things that makes humans unique from other things and objects in Lao Tzu's view is that humans can choose to live out of harmony with the Tao. Humans can disrupt the natural way as we attempt to alter our circumstances and our environment in order to meet desires or ambitions for things that we're making up sort of as we go or desiring, things that are not in keeping with our day or the Tao. Humans create things and customs, rules, regulations, ways of doing things together or for others or against others. And as a result, the environment which is natural and would be in accord with the Tao and most favorable to the fulfillment of our unique day ends up being lost or distorted. This causes people to make yet more and more changes in the attempt to satisfy new desires and ambitions to adjust the results of our prior actions and efforts. The outcome of all of this is that we increasingly live in ways that are contrary to our day and out of harmony with the Tao. As a result, we end up developing what we could call an outer self, a false self, a set of impulses that multiply and are destructive of our day and of the social and natural environment in which we find ourselves. There's a song I think is especially fitting here as it explores this idea of false and true self from an artist's point of view. It's my homemade recording of my song Masked Man, and I'll share it here.
I hold up my compassion, wield it like a warrior's shield. I deflect the tender touches, inviting me to yield. Never peel back my armor on this empty battlefield. Fear everything I've been hiding will be naked and revealed. And they'll see underneath it all, I'm bleeding. They'll see underneath it all, I'm bleeding. That morning in Seattle, couldn't see the rain. Wrapped inside the fog that soaked the city like a stain. You and me in that hotel room, deaf and silent once again. And me stripped down to nothing, till just one thing remained. My fear of everything, everything I'm needing. My fear of everything, everything I'm needing. There's a man that I am watching, a painted smile upon his face, but he keeps me at a distance from his frightened hiding space. Everyone who knows him, it seems he's got everything in place, but I catch him in my mirror sometimes. I see the mask that is his cage. He's the frightened animal, the animal I'm feeding. He's the frightened animal, the animal I'm feeding. underneath the mask. Underneath I'm bleeding, everything I'm needing, animal I'm feeding, underneath the mask. Underneath the mask. Underneath I'm bleeding, everything I'm needing, the animal I'm feeding, underneath the mask. Underneath the mask. Underneath it all I'm bleeding, everything I'm needing, the animal I'm feeding, underneath the mask. Underneath the mask. Underneath I'm bleeding, everything I'm needing, the animal I'm feeding, underneath the mask. Underneath the mask. Underneath the mask. Underneath the mask. Underneath the mask.
In Lao Tzu's way of seeing, the masks we wear are our outer selves. They're forged by our inner wounds and neediness and hungers. They cover over the ways we're out of harmony with the Tao and disruptive of our day. The Tao, in giving all things their day, gives us our true or inner self, in contrast to that outer self. The day aligned with the Tao is our true personal identity, our self. So Taoism views the self as part of a larger cosmic network of selves and things. The goal is to live in harmony with this interconnectedness rather than to control or dominate it. Only in that harmony is any true self its true self. Only in such harmony do Day and Tao flow together. But what about consciousness specifically? My descriptive approach to consciousness revolves around my understanding that everything and person is conscious in the sense of experiencing events and stimuli, but not all things have awareness or an awareness of being aware. The Tao Te Ching encourages transcending this outer self or false self, and crucial to that process is the intentional cultivation of being aware of one's thoughts and actions in order to live in alignment with the Tao and with our day. This includes cultivating an awareness of being part of a larger whole rather than simply separate entities. And this enables us to let go of that excessive self-importance and focus on living in harmony with the world around us. It enables us to let go of false ways of doing that in harmony with the false world we've created around us and return to doing that in the way of the Tao, the natural way that things would be. And this can only be achieved through awareness, particularly self-awareness. In Taoism, then, consciousness, identified here with awareness, is not something that just is. It is something to be sought and cultivated. Buddha and Lao Tzu. I want to give a little summary and comparison here. I'm not going to review everything we've explored in the views of consciousness as seen in Buddha and Lao Tzu. I think just a very few short summary statements might serve. And here's where they both agree. They both agree that consciousness is intricately connected with awareness and being aware of being aware, and so being aware of what one is aware of. They both agree that consciousness is something that can and should be cultivated. In Lao Tzu, that's for the purpose of living in harmony with the day and the Tao. For the Buddha, it's in order to achieve liberation from the cycle of craving and suffering. Here's where they differ. For the Buddha, consciousness is not ontological. It has no being in and of itself, or isn't centered in a being that has being in and of itself. For Lao Tzu, it seems implicit that there is a someone, a self, who does the cultivating, someone who has consciousness and is cultivating what it means to be aware and therefore to adjust to the Tao. In the teaching of the Buddha, the teaching itself is the way or path to liberation For Lao Tzu, the way, or the Tao, is not a path or way that leads to something. It is the way everything functions. So putting this kind of in my own expression, for the Buddha, the way leads to liberation. For Lao Tzu, the way leads to itself. All right, a final comparison. And this will be important, I think, for future episodes. While they differ in their views of the self and consciousness in some significant ways, both Lao Tzu and Buddha present a vision of reality in which all things are connected. No being, including you or I, exists as independent, isolated, purely individual selves. All right, let me try to wrap up here. My focus in the prior episode, just before this one, which explored the Gita and animism, was on the nature of consciousness, and in a way that reflected my own interests and bias. This look at the Buddha and Lao Tzu served as a reminder to me that in addition to the appropriate questions about consciousness as an idea or what it is, there's a very real practical aspect relative to how to cultivate it, how to grow and develop it. So how to cultivate ourselves. And had I been thinking of that in the last episode, I probably would have been able to draw out the things that the Gita offers in this regard. For like the Buddha, the Gita addresses both the what of consciousness and awareness and the how of cultivating that. And hopefully we can return to that. In fact, I'm going to want to explore a number of comparisons between the Gita and animism and how they see consciousness with the views of the Buddha and the Lao Tzu that I've looked at here. But first, I want to continue to draw from other religious wells. And so in the next episode, I'm going to turn to the so-called Western religious heritages and see what they have to say about consciousness and the self. Until next time.